wildlife value of their land. Mark Williams farms near St Agnes, where he and his family have transformed their approach to agriculture. Mark's daughter Inez also happens to be a landscape advisor for Natural England, and they're both joining us this morning. Morning to you both.
Good morning, Justin.
Thank you very much for being with us. Tell us a bit more about how you've changed your approach to farming and agriculture to sort of take into account the impact on wildlife a bit more.
Yeah, certainly. I think as a philosophical approach, a kind of generation, we have a responsibility to kind of put right some of the damage to the planet, so that our children and future generations have the land to farm effectively in line with nature. So that's a kind of philosophical position. We got 200-acre farm managed by my brother and myself, and we're trying to practice regenerative approaches in partnership with the grower. That's my daughter's business set up with her husband Chris.
And of course, it's in your interests, isn't it, to farm with nature, not just for future generations, but for now. I mean, you will get the best out of the land if you are working with nature rather than against it. That must be. I know farming can come in for a lot of criticism for over farming and over digging the land and putting things on the land and taking things out of the land and everything else. But it's really in your interests as farmers as much as possible to work with nature, isn't it?
I think for the last 20 years, the farm has looked at creating a management philosophy which increases carbon sequestration, improves soil health and ecosystem services. And that philosophy over the last 20 years really came to fruition during last summer, during the droughts, where like the brassica crops and our tree production crops didn't die as we saw in across the country. And that's purely down to that sort of input and gradual increase in soil health through the farm's 5-year rotation of brassicas, cereals, cover crops, including things like phacelia and clover. And it really creates that humus and that wider benefit for the environment, but for us as well, not losing yields.
So in addition, we're kind of cut right back on pesticide usage, using GPS systems and auto steer on our machinery, targeted camera guided hose. We've got it all improves accuracy. We're only treating invasive weeds, so not blanket spraying. We're looking at reduced runoff. We've increased companion planting, which encourages beneficial insects. We've got quite a few hives on the farm now, and all of those sort of things associated with no-till. They're techniques that an awful lot of farmers are using now, and certainly what we're finding is that if we try things out, that other farmers that are sort of bigger than us, we've got 200 acres, I say, but large farmers like Riviera produce 8,000 acres. They are using these techniques now. So I think that's the real positive message. But I think what we've got with the grower is we've been able to, and as I can talk about it, we've been able to grow and sell over 1 million trees this year, all grown in Cornwall and on the north coast, which is pretty unusual.
I was going to say, that's not always easy to grow trees on the north coast, is it? Because of the prevailing winds and the sea and everything else there. And that's really interesting, Inez, that farming isn't just about crops that we might eat. We've got to think about rewilding the countryside and our forests and woodlands as well. How much do you think farming will need to go down that route of things like crops of trees and selling trees on to other people as a way of helping to bring in money, but also helping the planet as well?
Yes, I think over the last 50 years, farmers have been encouraged to diversify. And I think what we found with the grower, which is that mine and my partner's next stage in the generation of our family farm, is it works intertwined with the food production. So we've grown 1 million trees this year. And together we've grown another 1 million for this coming year of broadleaf and coniferous species. And that's working in the farm's rotation of the hay meadows and the brassicas cereals. So I think it's important to note that it's not taking land out of food production.
Yeah.
It's working with it as an essential, another element of a break crop, really. Those lessons in agriculture when it comes to avoiding pests and diseases are very much something that in tree production the commercial industry needs to be following as well. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see trees that we've grown on St Agnes, planted like mere miles away as part of like a solar farm. And it's really exciting to know that in 20, 30 years time, stuff we've grown will be there to help this like wider concept of like nature recovery and like our pledge on the farm itself, planting a heritage orchard as part of an agroforestry system, restoring hedgerows, planting trees, creating wildflower seed orchards. It all works together to create this positive philosophy, and rather than taking things away from nature, you're working with it to build up. So that's something I think we will be really proud of illustrating and showing.
And Mark, very briefly, as someone who's spent a lifetime in farming, all of this that you've described today, all of the work that you're doing there as a family now on the land, what obvious differences are you seeing in terms of the types of wildlife and the volume of wildlife that you're seeing now compared to, say, 20 years ago?
I think from our farm, we've always been fairly low input anyway. But even so, we've seen an awful lot more bees recently, which is obviously good. We've got beneficial insects coming in, lots of ladybirds, for example. And I think the one stark point that was raised with me last summer was that the UK's biggest supplier of tree seeds came down and inspected our beach and asked us how do we keep the beach so clean of aphids and so on? How much spray do we use? So we said we haven't sprayed it at all.
Wow.
He didn't believe me. And it was because the conditions of the soil were so good and we had so many ladybirds that there were no aphids.
Wow. You thought we were joking when we said ladybirds.
Well, it sounds beautiful, and I know the area well. I know some very good friends who farm not far from you at Mount Hawke, so I know the area very well. Congratulations on all you're doing. Thank you very much for telling us about it this morning. Lovely to hear from you. Mark Williams, farming near St Agnes, and his daughter there, Inez, as well.